The sunset bled crimson and gold across the distant hills as Doris, a widow etched by both grit and grace, guided her venerable motorcycle along the quiet main thoroughfare. Its rumble, a familiar heartbeat to her, was often perceived as a low growl of disruption by the town's residents. She had moved to this quiet cluster of homes, nestled by winding waterways and ancient forests, only after her husband's passing, a man whose spirit, like hers, found freedom on two wheels. The motorcycle, a gleaming testament to shared journeys and whispered dreams, was now both her inheritance and her solace. Doris anticipated the familiar landscape of averted gazes, hurried whispers that seemed to eddy around her like invisible currents, and the subtle click of doors closing a fraction too quickly. To many she remained the strange two-wheeled widow, an anomaly in a town that valued long-standing traditions and predictable rhythms. She spent her days in the converted garage behind her small cottage, a sanctuary smelling of oil, metal and faint dust, meticulously coaxing life back into old engines, offering quiet wisdom to lost travelers who occasionally found their way to her door. Yet, for most, her presence was a quiet discomfort, an untamed element in their carefully cultivated order. She never complained. The deep lines around her eyes, etched by years of sun and wind, also held a profound understanding. Human hearts, like stubborn old engines, often took time to accept what they did not immediately comprehend. Her hands, strong and calloused, moved with a practiced grace that spoke of countless hours spent in precise, patient repair, mirroring a similar process she applied to her own fractured spirit. Each turn of a wrench, each polish of chrome, was a quiet ritual, a conversation with the memory of a love that still echoed in the silent corners of her home. Her mornings always began with the same deliberate ritual. She would brew a strong, dark tea, the steam curling like a question mark into the cool air. She'd sit at a small round table, tracing the faded pattern on the ceramic mug that had been his, feeling the ghost of his warmth beside her. Then, she'd walk to the workbench, her fingers brushing the cool, aged leather of his riding gloves, draped over the handlebars of his bike. This old machine, a silent sentinel, was her most cherished possession, a tangible link to a past that still pulsed with vivid memories. The scent of worn leather and engine oil was the perfume of their shared life. One particularly crisp morning, the air still thick with the promise of autumn, Doris was hunched over the carburetor of a vintage Harley, her brow furrowed in concentration. The specific clatter of a loose valve had been eluding her for days, a small discord in the otherwise harmonious symphony of the machine. The sun, newly risen, cast long shadows through the open garage door, illuminating dancing motes of dust in the shaft of light. A subtle aroma of burnt sugar wafting from a neighbor's kitchen, usually a comforting scent, now felt strangely alien, a reminder of a domesticity she once knew, now hollowed out. Suddenly, a sharp, terrified cry pierced the morning stillness. It was a sound that seemed to tear through the fabric of the quiet town, raw and immediate. Doris's hands, which a moment before had been immersed in the intricate ballet of gears and springs, froze. Her heart, which often felt like a quiet, steady thrum, now hammered against her ribs with an urgent primal beat. She dropped her tools with a metallic clatter that echoed eerily in the sudden void of silence. Without a moment's hesitation, her weathered face grim, she ran toward the sound, her boots pounding heavily on the gravel path. Through her gate and onto the street, she saw it immediately. A small boy, perhaps no older than 7 or 8, sprawled in the middle of the narrow road. He was tangled beneath an overturned bicycle, one knee twisted. At an unnatural angle, crimson blooming starkly against the light fabric of his trousers. His eyes, wide with a terror that seemed to age him in an instant, were fixed on something beyond her. A car, she realized, must have passed too quickly, a blur of indifference leaving him there. The air still vibrated with the faint, receding hum of its engine. Doris didn't think. She simply acted. Her instincts, honed by a life of navigating unpredictable roads and unforeseen obstacles, took over. She moved with a speed that belied her age, reaching the boy in a few swift strides. Gently but firmly, she freed him from the twisted frame of the bicycle, lifting him into her arms. He was surprisingly light, trembling uncontrollably, a small bird fallen from its nest. "Easy, little one," she murmured, her voice usually firm, softened to a soothing balm. It's going to be all right now. His small body pressed against her, radiating fear, and in that moment, the town's whispers, the distant glances, all melted away. Only the boy's terrified breath and the urgent beat of her own heart remained. Doris carried the boy back to her workshop, the scent of antiseptic and oil, a strange comfort in the immediate aftermath of the street's sudden trauma. Inside, the familiar embrace of worn tools and the ghost of her husband's presence offered a silent reassurance. She settled the boy onto an old, upholstered stool, its fabric faded but still soft, a relic from a time when it served as a comfortable spot for her husband to sketch engine diagrams. The boy's face, streaked with dirt and tears, was still pale, but the terror in his eyes had begun to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity. "Hold still now," she instructed, her voice calm and steady, devoid of the panic that had seized him moments before. She moved with quiet efficiency, retrieving a first aid kit from a high shelf, her fingers instinctively reaching for the clean gauze and a small brown bottle of antiseptic. Her movements were economical, precise, much like the way she approached a stubborn engine. She cleaned the gash on his knee with a gentle touch, the boy wincing slightly but not crying. He watched her, a silent observer, his eyes absorbing every detail of the space around them. The framed photographs of vintage motorcycles leaning into impossibly steep curves, the shelves laden with parts like ancient artifacts, the faint glint of chrome. "Does it hurt much?" she asked, her gaze soft, meeting his. He shook his head, a small tremor still evident in his chin. While she worked, carefully wrapping a fresh bandage around his knee, he pointed to a faded image on the wall. It was a black and white photograph of her husband, younger, vibrant, leaning against a gleaming machine, a wide, free smile on his face. "Did you ride bikes like that?" he whispered, his voice still small. Doris paused, her hands still around his knee. A faint, tender smile touched her lips, a rare sight in the days since her loss. "Before you were even a thought, little one," she replied, her voice resonating with a quiet pride. "The open roads, the wind in my hair, they taught me everything I know. They raised me, in a way." Her gaze drifted to the photograph, a brief, bittersweet flicker in her eyes. The roads had taught her freedom, yes, but also resilience, the stark beauty of moving forward despite obstacles, and the profound companionship of a shared journey. The boy, named Leo, seemed to find a quiet fascination in her world, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and hushed tones of the homes he knew. He observed her hands, strong and scarred, as she tightened the last strip of tape on his bandage. His initial fear had given way to an almost reverent awe. He pointed to a collection of tiny, intricate metal models of motorcycles on a shelf. "Are these yours?" he asked, his voice now regaining a touch of childlike wonder. "Some are," she replied, "and some belonged to my husband. Each one tells a story if you know how to listen." She noticed the subtle shift in his breathing. The way his shoulders, initially hunched, had begun to relax. This was more than just a scraped knee. It was an accidental encounter that had opened a tiny, unexpected window into a world he hadn't known existed. The connection was wordless, built on shared vulnerability and the silent, accepting presence she offered. It was the first time in what felt like an eternity that someone had looked at her, truly, looked without judgment or pity. He saw her as a rescuer, a storyteller, a guardian of intriguing metallic secrets. As she finished, the distinct sound of hurried footsteps and an agitated voice echoed from the street. A woman burst through the garage door, her face a mask of frantic desperation, her eyes wide with a mother's deepest fear. It was Margaret, Leo's mother, her usually composed demeanor shattered by panic. Margaret was known for her meticulous household, her sharp tongue, and her unwavering belief in propriety, qualities that often manifested as thinly veiled disdain for Doris's unconventional life. She was one of the town's most vocal critics, her whispers about the biker widow often carried on the breeze like dry leaves. "My son!" Margaret cried, rushing towards Leo, her voice a raw tremor. She enveloped him in a fierce, protective embrace, checking him frantically for injuries, her hands running over his small body. Then, her gaze fell upon Doris, standing quietly by the workbench. The sight of her son, safe and bandaged, in the care of the very woman she had so often judged, seemed to momentarily steal her breath. Margaret's face, initially a canvas of fear, flushed crimson with a potent mix of relief and profound shame. The words caught in her throat, a jumble of unexpressed apologies and belated gratitude. I didn't know," Margaret stammered, her eyes darting between Doris and Leo, the unspoken history of her judgment hanging heavy in the air. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken tensions and the sudden uncomfortable weight of revelation. Doris, however, offered no accusation, no hint of, "I told you so." Her expression remained calm, her gaze steady, a profound well of quiet understanding. She simply nodded, a slight inclination of her head. "Kindness doesn't choose who deserves it, ma'am," she stated, her voice soft but firm, carrying the resonant weight of truth. "It simply acts when it's needed." The words hung in the air, a quiet and irrefutable counterpoint to Margaret's hastily constructed prejudices. It was a statement that carried the quiet dignity of someone who had learned the hard lessons of the road and the heart, someone who understood that sometimes the most profound acts of compassion arose in the most unexpected of circumstances. In the days that followed, an almost imperceptible shift began to ripple through the town. The initial shock of the accident, coupled with the undeniable fact of Doris's timely intervention, softened the edges of ingrained suspicion. Margaret, still burdened by the weight of her previous judgments, found herself in a perplexing new emotional landscape. She avoided Doris initially, but her gaze, when it happened to fall upon the workshop, carried a new hesitant curiosity. Leo, however, was a child unburdened by adult prejudices. He saw Doris not as the strange widow, but as his rescuer, a fascinating keeper of mechanical wonders. His scraped knee healed quickly, but his visits to the workshop began tentative at first, then daily. He would arrive after school, his small backpack slung over one shoulder, a quiet presence at the garage door. He didn't ask for much, just to watch, to absorb the rhythmic clink of tools, the rich smell of grease, the quiet hum of an engine being coaxed back to life. Doris, initially hesitant to allow this intrusion into her carefully guarded solitude, found herself slowly opening up. She would explain the intricacies of a carburetor, the purpose of a spark plug, the dance of pistons in an engine block. Her hands, once filled with the ghosts of her husband's touch, now moved with a new purpose, demonstrating, guiding, sharing. "See, Leo," she would say, her voice patient, "an engine is like a heart. Each part has to work together, in rhythm, for it to beat true." He listened intently, his small fingers tracing the contours of a discarded wrench, his eyes wide with a thirst for knowledge that transcended mere curiosity. He brought her small wildflowers he'd picked from the edge of the woods, or crude crayon drawings of roaring motorcycles. These small offerings, devoid of expectation, were like tiny droplets of warmth, slowly melting the ice around Doris's wounded heart. The workshop, once a solitary sanctuary, began to echo with a child's questions, a child's laughter, a child's unwavering trust. It was an unexpected, gentle intrusion that began to mend not just an engine, but something far more fragile and precious within Doris herself. She treated him with a tenderness that time had denied her the chance to give her own children, a quiet, profound act of giving that felt like a long-forgotten melody rediscovered. The quiet cadence of Leo's daily visits began to subtly shift Doris's internal landscape. What had started as a reactive act of kindness, born of immediate need, slowly transformed into a proactive offering. She found herself not merely allowing his presence but anticipating it, a small hopeful ember in the persistent chill of her grief. Leo's inherent curiosity about the mechanical world, a world so intrinsically linked to her late husband, began to unlock forgotten chambers within her own memory. It wasn't just about fixing bikes, it was about fixing connection, understanding the intricate dance of parts, and recognizing the deeper needs beneath the surface. Doris, with her keen observational skills honed by years on the road and a life of quiet contemplation, began to notice a certain melancholy in Leo. He was often quiet, almost reserved, despite his bright spark of curiosity. She observed the hurried pickups by his busy father, the fleeting, almost distracted goodbyes. It seemed Leo carried a quiet longing, a hunger not for toys or grand adventures, but for consistent, unhurried presence. His world, she surmised, was one of efficiency and tight schedules, where genuine connection often became a casualty. This observation stirred something deep within Doris, a recognition of a similar solitude she herself had once navigated, a different kind of neglect, the neglect of being too busy to truly see. One afternoon, as Leo sat patiently tracing the gears of a dismantled engine, his brow furrowed in imitation of her own concentration, Doris spoke. "Leo," she began, her voice soft, "you have a good eye for how things work. Would you like to truly learn? To understand how to bring these old machines back to life from the inside out?" It was more than an offer to teach. It was an invitation, a courageous step beyond the boundaries of her self-imposed isolation. It was an offer of her time, her wisdom, her very presence, consistently and without demand. Leo's eyes widened, a flicker of pure, unadulterated joy illuminating his face. He nodded eagerly, a small, shy smile spreading across his lips. "Yes, Miss Doris, more than anything." This genuine enthusiasm was a balm to her soul. She began to guide his small hands, teaching him the feel of a wrench, the gentle resistance of a bolt, the precise sound of a properly adjusted valve. She shared stories of the road, tales of breakdowns in remote places, and the ingenious ways her husband had taught her to improvise. The workshop became a classroom, a sanctuary, and a shared space of quiet mentorship. The reciprocity began almost immediately. Leo, in turn, started sharing his own small world with her. He showed her crude drawings of his imagined adventures, complete with a powerful, roaring motorcycle piloted by a fierce, kind woman with silver hair. He spoke of his school day, his small victories and his quiet frustrations, things he rarely seemed to articulate to his perpetually busy parents. He even started bringing her freshly baked cookies, still warm, from his mother's kitchen, a tangible, if still hesitant, offering from Margaret, brokered by her son's innocent affection. Margaret herself, though still somewhat reserved, would now offer a quick nod or a small, almost imperceptible smile when she came to pick up Leo. The hard edges of her judgment had softened, replaced by a grudging respect or perhaps a dawning realization. The strange biker widow was not so strange after all. She was simply a woman with a generous heart and a rare gift for seeing beyond the obvious. Leo's brightened demeanor, his newfound confidence, and the genuine joy he found in Doris's company were undeniable. Doris realized with a quiet certainty that her own healing was not a solitary journey. It was woven into the fabric of helping Leo, in sharing her wisdom, in nurturing his nascent curiosity. The quiet sorrow she carried did not vanish, but it began to transform, like a seed finding purchase in fertile ground. It was no longer a barren emptiness, but a space where new connections could grow, where empathy could flourish. The rhythmic clink of wrenches, the low hum of engines, the innocent chatter of a child, these sounds began to fill the quiet hollow within her, not erasing the past but enriching the present. The act of giving, of pouring her long-dormant knowledge and affection into this small, eager soul, was slowly but surely rebuilding her own world, one quiet, deliberate step at a time. It was the deepest form of self-care she had ever known, a profound truth whispered by the turning gears of an old motorcycle and the earnest gaze of a boy. Pause a moment. What dormant talent within you awaits the right person to awaken it? Share that small magic in the comments. The question hung in the air, a silent invitation, like the scent of oil and possibility that lingered in Doris's workshop. For her, it was the meticulous art of understanding and repairing, not just machines, but the quiet mechanics of human connection. The subtle misalignments that, once understood, could be gently coaxed back into harmony. This talent, once a shared passion with her late husband, had become a quiet refuge, a silent conversation with grief. Now through Leo it was becoming a bridge, a language spoken not just with metal and grease, but with patience and presence. She had learned that the most profound acts of creation often involved the gentle restoration of what was broken, finding beauty in the function and purpose in the mend. Her hands, once solely for her own mourning rituals, now found new strength in the act of sharing, discovering that the true magic lay not in the complexity of the machine, but in the simple, unwavering connection forged over its intricate parts. The aroma of freshly baked bread from the bakery across the street used to drift into Doris's workshop, a wistful reminder of a communal life she felt increasingly excluded from. But now it seemed to carry a different resonance. The quiet dignity with which Doris had offered aid to Leo and the subsequent transformation in the boy began to resonate, subtle as a whispered rumor, through the town's tightly woven social fabric. Her workshop, once a solitary bastion, was slowly but surely becoming a quiet nexus of unexpected interactions. Mr. Henderson, the proprietor of the general store, a man known for his brusque efficiency and a penchant for observing everything from behind his spectacles, was the first witness to truly register the change. He had for months watched Doris's comings and goings with a detached, almost dismissive air. To him, she was an oddity, a relic. But now he saw her interacting with Leo. He witnessed the boy's bright-eyed enthusiasm, the way Doris would patiently explain a concept, her hands gesturing, a gentle smile occasionally gracing her lips. He saw her, not as the biker widow, but as an engaged mentor, a quiet fount of knowledge. One afternoon he saw Margaret herself briefly, hesitantly, exchange a few civil words with Doris outside the workshop, a scene that would have been unthinkable weeks prior. The surprise on his face was fleeting, quickly masked by his usual stoicism, but the seed of a different understanding had been planted. The circle of connection around Doris began to expand, not with a sudden roar, but with a gentle ripple. Old Mr. Finch, whose ancient lawnmower had sputtered its last breath, hesitated for days before finally, shyly, approaching Doris's garage. He had heard snippets of conversation, seen Leo's bright face. With a deep breath, he wheeled his venerable machine into her domain. Doris, without judgment or fanfare, took it in, her skilled hands diagnosing the issue with calm expertise. When he returned, the mower purring like a contented cat, he left with not just a repaired machine, but a quiet sense of gratitude and a new perspective on the woman who lived behind the old iron gate. Soon, other small repairs followed. A child's scooter with a stubborn wheel, a broken pedal on an old bicycle, a frayed belt on a neighbor's antique sewing machine. Each request was met with the same quiet competence and gentle patience. Doris didn't advertise, she didn't solicit. People came because they had heard, they had seen, or perhaps because a subtle shift in the town's collective consciousness allowed them to see her not as an outsider, but as someone with a valuable, even cherished gift. The workshop, once a place of solitary communion with memories, now buzzed with soft conversations, the rhythmic sounds of gentle repair, and the growing hum of community. The old judgments, though not entirely vanished, now encountered a quiet, unyielding dignity. On a rare trip to the general store, Doris found herself waiting in line. A woman, known for her sharp tongue and often unkind observations, inadvertently nudged Doris with her overloaded basket, causing a small packet of tea to tumble to the floor. "Oh, do watch where you're going, dear," the woman said, her tone edged with its usual impatience, not recognizing Doris immediately. Doris, however, simply bent down, retrieved the tea, and handed it back. With a small polite nod. "No harm done," she said, her voice calm and even. The woman, suddenly recognizing Doris, faltered. The usual cutting remark died on her lips, replaced by a momentary awkward silence. The calm dignity of Doris's response disarmed the indifference, deflecting the subtle aggression without a single aggressive word. It was a silent testament to her newfound inner strength. Her symbolic object, the motorcycle, once a stark emblem of her singular journey and her loss, also began to transform. She no longer merely polished it as a shrine to her husband's memory. Now, with Leo observing, she would explain its intricate parts, demonstrating how each component, though separate, contributed to the whole, allowing for movement, for freedom, for new paths. The bike became a teaching tool, a shared passion, a symbol of potential rather than simply a monument to the past. The wrench, once a tool for her personal grief, was now a bridge, building connections, one gentle repair at a time. The workshop, once a silent echo chamber of sorrow, now resonated with the lively shared purpose of repair and renewal, a steady pulse of connection vibrating through its walls. Her hands, which had once cradled memories, now skillfully wrought new realities. bringing not just machines but fragmented relationships back to a harmonious hum. The seasons turned, and with them, the quiet currents of the town's perception continued to shift. What began as an isolated act of kindness blossomed into something far more expansive, a testament to the ripple effect of genuine human connection. The subtle hum of repair emanating from Doris's workshop had, by late summer, become a familiar, almost comforting presence in the town. It was no longer a sound that provoked whispers, but rather one that evoked quiet respect. The annual community fair, traditionally held on the sun-drenched town common, provided the perfect canvas for Doris's public bloom. It was an event where local artisans displayed their crafts, where children raced in sack competitions, and where neighbors, for one day, shared some of their customary reserve. This year, however, there was an unexpected addition. Leo, now taller, more confident, his eyes still bright with an inquisitive spark, had organized a small mechanics corner near the old gazebo. He proudly displayed a few antique bicycle parts, carefully cleaned and reassembled by his own small hands, under Doris's patient guidance. When a stubborn antique pedal car, destined for the fair's charity auction, refused to budge, it was Leo who, with a quiet confidence that belied his age, suggested they ask Miss Doris. He had learned well from her, not just the mechanics of the machines, but the quiet dignity of offering help. Doris, initially hesitant to step into the bustling public sphere, was gently persuaded. She arrived, not on her roaring motorcycle, but on foot, dressed in practical, comfortable attire, her presence emanating a calm strength. At her makeshift repair station, which quickly drew a small crowd, Doris worked with her customary grace. Her hands, strong and sure, moved over the intricate parts of the pedal car. She explained each step, not to show off, but to educate, to demystify, her voice carrying a quiet authority that commanded attention. The scent of oil and metal, usually confined to her workshop, now mingled with the smells of popcorn and sweet pastries, a curious but harmonious blend. It was then that Margaret, dressed in her Sunday best, approached the growing crowd. She had come with her husband, initially to enjoy the fair, but her gaze kept drifting towards Doris. She watched, captivated, as Doris patiently answered a child's question about a gear, her eyes crinkling at the corners with a genuine smile. Then, to the surprise of many onlookers, Margaret stepped forward. "Doris," she began, her voice a little shaky but clear, I wanted to thank you, again." She paused, took a deep breath and continued, her gaze meeting Doris's. "For everything, for Leo, and for showing me that sometimes what we think we know about a person is only a very small part of their story." It wasn't an effusive apology, but for Margaret, known for her rigid demeanor, it was a profound public recognition, a quiet act of humility that spoke volumes. Mr. Henderson, watching from his stall, nodded almost imperceptibly, a hint of admiration in his usually unreadable expression. The subtle, indifferent antagonist had at last truly seen. The image of fullness that day was starkly different from the quiet solitude of Doris's early mornings. Instead of a single figure brewing tea in a silent house, she was at the heart of the fair's gentle activity, surrounded by smiling faces. Children peered over shoulders, fascinated by her work. Adults offered quiet words of thanks. Laughter, genuine and unrestrained, flowed around her. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was an essential thread in the community's tapestry, a quiet, strong anchor. Later, as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of lavender and peach, the circle of kindness was visibly demonstrated. Leo, his own small repair finished, spotted a younger child struggling to open a stubborn toy. Without a word, he knelt, his brow furrowed in concentration, and with the patient, methodical instruction he had received from Doris, gently coaxed the toy back to functionality. The younger child's beaming smile mirrored the genuine gratitude that had once shone in Leo's own eyes. The lesson had been passed on, a silent testament to the enduring power of a single act of compassion, now multiplied and blooming throughout the small town. Doris watched, a quiet, profound sense of peace settling over her. The true music of the community was not in the loud cheers, but in these quiet, interconnected acts of care. As the days shortened into autumn, a different kind of quiet settled over Doris's home. The silence was no longer a cavernous echo of absence, but a peaceful hum, woven with the lingering warmth of shared laughter and the satisfying thrum of purpose found. Her workshop, still smelling faintly of oil and metal, now also carried the fainter, sweeter scent of old wood polished by many hands, and the subtle, earthy aroma of the small potted herbs Leo had gifted her, now thriving on a sun-drenched windowsill. She sat at her small, round kitchen table, the familiar ceramic mug, warmed in her hands, its pattern still faded but now imbued with layers of new memories. The sun, a pale gold through the window, illuminated dust motes dancing, no longer in sorrow, but in gentle peace. She recalled the days when the weight of solitude pressed down like an unyielding stone, when the town's indifference felt like a palpable chill. But now those memories were softened, reframed by the unexpected turns of her journey. The narrator reflected on how pain, when tended with care and courage, could indeed become the most fertile ground for new growth. Doris had not forgotten her husband. His memory was not erased, but integrated, like a foundational beam in a newly built structure. His spirit, once represented solely by the silent motorcycle, now echoed in the lessons she imparted, the connections she fostered, the gentle strength she now shared with the world. The mechanics of grief, she had discovered, were much like the mechanics of an engine, complex, requiring patience, precise attention to each broken part, and the courage to reassemble it with a new understanding, a new rhythm, and she finally understood. The most beautiful gardens are not those without weeds, but those where each flower has learned to grow around its scars, stronger and more vibrant because of them. Her own soul, once a landscape of winter, had experienced its own gentle spring. The motorcycle, her beloved inheritance, still sat polished and ready in the workshop, a testament to freedom. But it was no longer just a symbol of loss or escape. It was a beacon of connection, a silent invitation to those who sought repair, not just for machines, but for the quiet, yearning parts of their own hearts. The roads, which had once created her, had now led her to a different kind of destination, a community where her unique rhythms were understood, appreciated, and deeply valued. She had learned that the journey to healing was not about outrunning the past, but about finding new ways to carry it, transformed, into a richer, more connected future. The essence of her husband's enduring love now manifested not just in quiet remembrance, but in the vibrant, living acts of kindness she extended to others, a legacy that pulsed with warmth and renewed purpose. This was her soul's spring, a quiet unfolding of purpose and connection born from the raw soil of loss. Doris's journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in the loudest roar, but in the gentle, persistent hum of a heart willing to mend, to share, and to bloom anew. It teaches us that the pathways to healing are often paved with unexpected encounters and the courage to offer what we have, even when we feel we have little left to give. Her story is a testament to the profound truth that our most valuable talents, those skills that lie dormant beneath layers of daily routine or quiet sorrow, are often awakened not for our own sake, but for the sake of another. And in that selfless act of giving, we find our deepest repair. If her story, like a gentle rain, watered something within you, stirring a forgotten dream, an unexpressed kindness, or a renewed belief in the power of connection, we invite you to share that resonant feeling. What small act of kindness have you witnessed or offered that changed a perception, however subtly? What hidden skill or piece of wisdom do you hold that, like Doris's mechanical prowess, could be a bridge to someone else's need? Leave a bloom in the comments to let us know you are here, that her journey touched your own. Tell us what you learned, what resonated deeply within your own quiet landscape. Don't let your own story, brimming with potential and unseen wisdom, wither in silence. Let it too find its voice and its bloom. For in sharing our quiet truths, we cultivate a garden of collective hope, one heartfelt story at a time. Your silent strength, your gentle wisdom, your unique perspective. These are the threads that weave the richest tapestries of human experience. Let them unfurl,